Before we uncover how a simple barcode became a weapon of international espionage, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. It helps us bring these forgotten histories to light. To understand how a global intelligence network was dismantled by a woman earning $3.35 an hour, one must first understand the landscape of suburban America in 1985. It was a time of high gloss and deep anxiety. The theaters were showing Rocky IV, where the Cold War was fought with boxing gloves, but in the quiet neighborhoods of Silver Spring, Maryland, the conflict was far more subtle. It was hidden in the hum of power lines, the locked briefcases of government employees, and, as it turned out, in the fluorescent-lit aisles of the super-fresh grocery store on Georgia Avenue. Betty Miller was 42 years old. She was a woman defined, at least to the outside world, by her uniform, a polyester smock in a shade of orange that flattered no one, a name tag that was slightly crooked, and comfortable shoes that were necessary for 8-hour shifts standing on a rubber mat. She had worked at Superfresh for 6 years. She knew the rhythm of the store better than she knew the rhythm of her own breathing. She knew that Tuesday mornings were for the retirees who paid an exact change, counting out pennies with trembling hands. She knew that Friday evenings were for the harried fathers buying diapers and 6-packs of beer, avoiding eye contact. But mostly, Betty knew the items. In 1985, the Universal Product Code, the barcode, was still something of a technological marvel to the older generation, but to Betty, it was a language. The beep of the scanner was the soundtrack of her life. Beep, a gallon of milk. Beep, a loaf of Wonder Bread. Beep, a jar of ragu. She didn't just scan, she observed. It was a habit born of boredom and a sharp, underused intellect. Betty had wanted to be a librarian before life, a sick parent, and a marriage that ended too soon had anchored her to the checkout lane. So, she read people through their groceries. The first crack in the facade appeared on a rainy Tuesday in mid-October. The store was quiet, the kind of quiet where the hum of the freezer units feels oppressive. At 10:15 in the morning, a man approached Betty's register. She knew him by sight, though they had never exchanged more than pleasantries. He was unremarkable in every way. Mid-40s, receding hairline, wearing a beige raincoat that seemed to absorb the grayness of the day. He looked like every other mid-level bureaucrat who lived in the DC suburbs. He bought the same things every week: instant coffee, a newspaper, frozen dinners, and cigarettes. But on this Tuesday there was a variation. He placed 3 items on the conveyor belt: a loaf of rye bread, a carton of eggs, and a single can of generic peas. Betty ran them across the scanner. The bread beeped. The eggs beeped. The can of peas did not. She frowned, trying it again. She smoothed out the label, thinking it might be crinkled. Nothing. She punched the code in manually, her fingers flying over the keypad. As she held the can, turning it over to look for the price sticker, her thumb brushed against the paper label. It felt wrong. "Sorry about this," Betty said, her voice cheerful, the automatic customer service tone she wore like armor. "The scanner is being temperamental today." The man didn't smile. He didn't look at his watch or sigh, which is what most customers would do. He stood perfectly still. His eyes were fixed on the can in her hand with an intensity that Betty found suddenly, inexplicably, unsettling. "It's fine," he said. His voice was flat. "Just type in the price. It's 39 cents. Betty looked at the label again. It was the store brand, Superfresh quality peas. But the paper felt slightly thicker than usual. And there, right under the nutritional information, was a tiny smudge. It looked like a printing error, a small blot of blue ink near the ingredient list. 39 cents, she repeated, keying it in. She placed the can in the brown paper bag. The man paid with a $5 bill. He took his change, took his bag, and walked out into the rain. He didn't check his receipt. It was a nothing moment, a scanner failure, a smudge of ink. But Betty Miller had a mind that snagged on inconsistencies like a sweater on a nail. Why did the label feel thick? Why was he buying a single can of peas when she knew from months of scanning his groceries that he bought frozen vegetables? He was a frozen spinach man. He had never bought canned peas before. Betty watched him get into a blue Ford sedan in the parking lot. She watched him sit there for a full minute before starting the engine. "Clean up on aisle 4, the loudspeaker crackled, snapping her back to reality. Betty shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was just peas. People changed their diets. People tried new things. But 2 hours later, at 12:30, another man came to her line. This one was different, younger, fitter, wearing a varsity jacket that looked a little too new. He bought a pack of gum and a bottle of soda, and as he was leaving, Betty saw him stop by the trash can at the exit. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a can. He dropped it into the trash. It was a can of generic peas. Betty stopped scanning. The customer in front of her, a woman with a cart full of cat food, cleared her throat. "Miss? I'm sorry," Betty stammered. "One moment." She looked at the trash can. Why would someone bring a can of peas into the store just to throw it away? Unless he hadn't brought it in. Unless he had picked it up inside. But he hadn't bought it. That night, Betty lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the stagnant air of her bedroom. The pieces didn't fit. The beige raincoat man bought the peas. The varsity jacket man threw away a can of peas. Had she imagined it? Had the second man perhaps bought the peas at a different register and she just hadn't seen him? No, she was the only register open from 12:00 to 1 now. Betty Miller didn't know it yet, but she had just witnessed the handoff of a message that would eventually reach the desk of the Director of Central Intelligence. She fell asleep with the sound of the scanner beeping in her memory and the feeling of a thickened paper label on her thumb. The week followed in a blur of routine, but Betty's eyes were now wide open. She felt a strange, vibrating tension, the kind she usually only felt during the final minutes of a suspense movie. She began to keep a small notepad in her apron pocket, tucked behind her pack of tissues. She named the first man the architect because he built his order so carefully. She named the second man the student. On Thursday, the architect returned. It was 10:15 a.m. The precision of his arrival was the first notation in Betty's book. Subject, architect. Time, 10:15 a.m. Items, milk, newspaper, box of Morton salt. Betty scanned the milk. Beep. She scanned the paper. Beep. She reached for the blue cylinder of salt. It was the iconic package, the girl with the umbrella. Betty's heart hammered against her ribs. She gripped the salt container. She ran her thumb over the label. It was smooth, normal. She scanned it. Beep. She felt a wash of disappointment, followed by a wave of relief. She was being ridiculous. She was a middle-aged cashier letting an overactive imagination run wild because she was lonely. There were no spies in Silver Spring. She bagged the salt. "Have a nice day." "You too," the architect said. He didn't look at her. He left. Betty watched him go. She waited. The lunch rush began. The store filled with office workers buying sandwiches and sodas. Betty scanned and bagged, scanned and bagged. $11 passed. $12 passed. At 12:45, the student walked in. Betty felt a jolt of adrenaline so sharp it made her hands shake. He was wearing the same jacket. He walked with a casual, bouncing stride. He didn't come to her register immediately. He walked down aisle 6, baking goods and spices. Betty craned her neck. She had a customer, Mrs. Higgins, who was slowly writing out a check for $12.43. "Date at the top, dear," Betty said gently, her eyes darting to aisle 6. The student emerged from the aisle. He wasn't holding anything. He walked to the front of the store, grabbed a candy bar from the rack near the magazines, and stepped into her line. "Just this," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Betty scanned the candy bar. 75 cents. He paid. He left. Betty frowned. He hadn't bought the salt. Had she been wrong? Her shift ended at 3:00. Usually, Betty went straight home to feed her cat, Barnaby, and watch the afternoon news. Today, she clocked out, took off her orange smock, and grabbed a shopping basket. She walked to aisle 6. She stood in front of the spices and baking supplies. Sugar, flour, baking soda, salt. There were 3 rows of Morton salt. The blue cylinders were lined up perfectly. Betty stared at them. She looked for anything out of place. A gap, a misalignment. She saw nothing. She reached out and took the front container from the middle row. She turned it over. Nothing. She put it back. She took the container behind it. Nothing. She was about to give up when she noticed something on the shelf below where the generic store brand salt was kept. One of the containers was turned slightly, the label facing inward. Betty picked it up. It was super fresh salt. She ran her thumb over the label. There. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, a tiny scratch on the paper, right over the barcode. It wasn't a tear. It was a deliberate incision, like someone had taken a razor blade and made a microscopic cut. And next to it, a small dot of green ink. Betty's breath hitched. Why would the architect buy name-brand salt, but the student visit the aisle and leave empty-handed? And then the realization hit her, cold and hard. The architect hadn't passed a message out of the store. He had put a message in the store. He must have brought the generic salt in with him, hidden in his coat pocket, and swapped it on the shelf while browsing. But why? If the student didn't buy it, then who was it for? Or perhaps the student had checked for it, seen the signal, and left it there. Betty bought the generic salt. She felt like a thief. She paid for it at register 4, avoiding eye contact with her colleague, Sarah. "Making a lot of soup, Betty?" Sarah asked, popping gum. "Just running low," Betty muttered. She took the salt home. She sat at her kitchen table, the container sitting in the center like an unexploded bomb. She got a magnifying glass from her sewing kit. She examined the green dot. Under magnification, it wasn't a dot. It was a triangle, a tiny, perfect green triangle drawn with a fine-point felt pen. Betty Miller sat back in her chair. The kitchen was silent except for the humming of the refrigerator. She realized with absolute certainty that her grocery store was not just a grocery store. It was a dead drop, a communication hub. The architect was leaving signals. The shelf was the message board. But what did a green triangle on a salt container mean? And more importantly, who was going to come looking for it? Fear is a strange thing. It can paralyze, or it can sharpen. For Betty, it did both. For the next 2 weeks, she lived in a state of heightened reality. Every customer was a suspect. Every can of soup was a potential dossier. She couldn't go to the police. She knew how that sounded. "Officer, a man bought salt and I think it's a Russian plot." They would laugh her out of the precinct. They would call the store manager. She would lose her job. In 1985, jobs were not easy to find for women her age without a degree. So she needed proof. The notebook filled up. October 22nd. Architect buys Folgers coffee. No marks on the can he buys. Checks aisle 3, canned fruit. Leaves. October 22nd. Student enters 45 minutes later. Buys nothing. Uses payphone in the vestibule. October 24th. Architect buys nothing. Walks to aisle 9, cleaning supplies. Spends 4 minutes looking at bleach. Leaves. October 24th. A new man enters. The mechanic. Greasy coveralls. Buys bleach from aisle 9. Checks out at register 2. The pattern was evolving. It wasn't just 2 men. It was a network. Betty realized that the architect was the distributor. He came in, planted an item or checked a signal, and then left. Sometimes he bought things to maintain his cover. Sometimes he didn't. The signals were on the labels. Betty developed a routine. Whenever the architect visited an aisle, she would find an excuse to restock that aisle 10 minutes later. "I'm just going to front-face the cereals," she told her manager, Mr. Henderson. "Since when do you care about facing the shelves, Miller?" Henderson grunted, not looking up from his clipboard. "Pride in my work, sir." She found them. A box of Cheerios with a small red line under the C. A bottle of Heinz ketchup with the price sticker peeled back and restuck upside down. A can of Alpo dog food with a dent in the exact center of the lid, placed at the very front of the row. Betty didn't touch them anymore. She knew that if she moved them, she would break the chain. She would disrupt the message. And if she disrupted the message, they would know someone was watching. She began to understand the language. Red mark meant danger, or maybe hold off. Green mark meant go. A specific product category corresponded to a specific location. Salt. The sea, the Navy, dog food, a park, a place with animals, cleaning supplies, a clean sweep, or a safe house. It was maddening. She was trying to decode a cipher without the key. But on November 5th, the game changed. The architect came in. He looked stressed. His movements were jerky. He was sweating, despite the chill in the air. He went straight to the baby aisle. Betty watched him from her register. He stood in front of the diapers. He wasn't looking at the diapers. He was looking at the baby formula. He reached into his raincoat pocket. He pulled out a can of formula, Similac. He placed it on the shelf, pushing the other cans back. He did it quickly, clumsily. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, walking fast. He didn't buy anything. Betty's line was empty. She made a decision. She flipped the sign on her register light to closed. "Bathroom break," she shouted to Sarah. She hurried to the baby aisle. She found the can. It was Similac, but the label was loose. Betty hesitated. This felt different. The other signals had been subtle. This was sloppy. This was urgent. She picked up the can. It felt light. Too light. She shook it. It didn't sound like powder. It didn't sound like liquid. It made a soft, thudding sound. She looked around. The aisle was empty. Betty pried at the loose seam of the label. It peeled back easily. Underneath the paper label, taped to the tin, was a small, flat envelope. Betty stared at it. This wasn't a signal. This was the payload. She heard footsteps approaching the aisle. Heavy boots. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She couldn't put the label back in time. She couldn't put the can back. She shoved the can into the deep pocket of her orange smock. She grabbed a box of baby wipes from the shelf and pretended to be straightening them. The footsteps stopped. Betty turned. Standing at the end of the aisle was the mechanic, the man in the greasy coveralls she had seen 2 weeks ago. He wasn't looking at the baby wipes. He was looking at her. "Can I help you find something, sir?" Betty asked. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. The mechanic stared at her. His eyes were hard, calculating. He looked at her hands. He looked at the empty space on the shelf where the can should have been. "Just looking for formula," he rasped. "For my grandson." "Right there," Betty pointed to the row. "Similac is on sale." The mechanic walked past her. He smelled of old oil and stale tobacco. He stood where she had been standing. He reached out and touched the cans. He felt the space where the specific can had been. He froze. He turned slowly to face Betty. "They seem to be out of the specific kind I need," he said. "We have plenty in the back," Betty lied. "I can go check." "No," he said. He took a step toward her. "I think the one I want was right here." Betty gripped the box of baby wipes. The can in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She was trapped in aisle 8 with a man she was increasingly certain was a Soviet spy, and she had his stolen intelligence in her pocket. "Register 1 to the front. Register 1 needed," the loudspeaker boomed. It was Sarah. The mechanic blinked. The tension broke, just for a second. "I have to go," Betty said, breathless. "My manager is calling." She scurried past him, not waiting for an answer. She felt his eyes boring into her back as she walked away. She didn't run, though every instinct screamed at her to sprint. She got to the front. She didn't go to her register. She went straight to the employee break room, locked the door, and collapsed onto a plastic chair. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the can out of her pocket. She peeled the label the rest of the way off. She took the envelope. It was sealed with wax. She knew she had crossed a line. Observing was one thing. Stealing a dead drop was another. She had inserted herself into the middle of a Cold War operation. The mechanic had seen her face. He knew she had been in the aisle. Betty Miller realized she couldn't handle this alone anymore. She needed help, and she knew exactly who to call. Not the police, not the manager. She needed to call her brother, Frank. Frank, who had spent 20 years in the Navy and now worked as a security contractor at the Pentagon. Frank, who always told her she read too many spy novels. She went to the payphone in the hallway. She dialed with trembling fingers. "Frank," she whispered when he answered. "Don't hang up. I have a can of baby formula, and I think it contains nuclear secrets." There was a long silence on the other end. "Betty," Frank said, sounding tired, "have you been drinking?" "Frank, listen to me. A man put it on the shelf. Another man tried to take it. I took it first. It has an envelope taped inside the label. I'm at the store. I'm locked in the break room. I think the man is still outside. Frank's tone changed instantly. The big brother annoyance vanished, replaced by a sharp military cadence. Describe the envelope. Small. White. Wax seal. No markings. Betty, Frank said, do not open that envelope. Do not leave the room. I am calling a number. Stay on the line. The next 40 minutes were the longest of Betty's life. She sat in the break room, clutching the phone receiver as if it were a lifeline. Frank had patched in another man, a man with a deep, calm voice who introduced himself only as Agent Sterling. Ms. Miller, Sterling said, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Betty told him. She told him about the architect, the student, the mechanic, the salt, the peas, the labels. You've been keeping a notebook? Sterling asked. Yes, it's in my apron. Good, that's very good. Is he still out there? Betty asked, looking at the break room door. It was a flimsy wooden door with a simple lock. One kick would shatter it. We have agents en route, Ms. Miller. They are 2 minutes away. Do not open the door for anyone unless they slide a badge under it first. Betty waited. She heard the muffled sounds of the store outside, the PA system announcing a sale on ground beef, the laughter of a stock boy, normalcy layered over terror. Then heavy footsteps in the hallway. A knock. Ms. Miller, FBI. A badge slid under the door. It was a leather wallet with a gold shield. Betty opened the door. 2 men in suits stood there. They looked nothing like the architect or the mechanic. They looked like lawyers. They ushered her out quickly, surrounding her. One of them took the can of formula from her hands with a gloved hand, placing it into an evidence bag. My notebook, Betty said, reaching for her pocket. We'll need that too, the agent said gently. They didn't take her out the front. They took her out the loading dock in the back. A black sedan was waiting. As they drove away, Betty looked back at the Superfresh. She saw a figure standing near the dumpster smoking a cigarette. It was the mechanic. He was watching the car leave. He threw his cigarette down and crushed it with his heel. They took her to a nondescript office building in Bethesda. They put her in a room with a table and a mirror that Betty knew was one-way glass. They brought her coffee. Then Agent Sterling entered. He was an older man, gray-haired, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. You've done a remarkable thing, Ms. Miller, he said, sitting down. And a very dangerous thing. Was I right? Betty asked. About the labels? Sterling placed a photocopy of her notebook on the table. We've been tracking a leak at the Naval Surface Warfare Center for 6 months. We knew information was getting out. We didn't know how. We were looking for radio transmissions, dead drops in parks, briefcase swaps. He tapped the notebook. We never thought to look at the grocery store shelves. He leaned forward. The can you intercepted contained film, photographs of classified schematics for a new sonar array. If that had gotten out, he trailed off. So you caught them? Betty asked, feeling a surge of pride. Sterling shook his head. No, we have the evidence, but we don't have the network. We know who picked up the can, or tried to. The mechanic. We have a tail on him now. But the architect? The one who planted it? We don't know who he is. He's the source. He's the one inside the Navy. Betty felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. So what happens now? Now, Sterling said, we have a problem. The network knows the drop was compromised. They know someone took the can. They saw you. He saw me. Betty whispered. Exactly. They will assume you are either a thief, a random interference, or a spy, Betty finished. Or a counterintelligence asset, Sterling corrected. If they think you're just a cashier who stole a can of formula, they might ignore you. But if they think you know what was in it, you are a loose end. I want to go home, Betty said. You can't go home, Ms. Miller. Not yet. We need to catch the architect, and we need your help to do it. My help? I'm a cashier. Yes, Sterling said, and that is exactly what we need you to be. We need you to go back to work. The plan was insane. Betty told them so. They wanted her to go back to the store the next day as if nothing had happened. They wanted her to act normal. We will have the store flooded with undercover agents, Sterling assured her. Stock boys, customers, the deli manager. You will be safer there than anywhere else. Why? Betty asked. Why go back? Because the architect doesn't know we have the can, Sterling explained. He knows the drop failed, but he doesn't know why. He has to establish a new protocol. He has to contact his handler, the mechanic, to figure out what went wrong. And the only way they can communicate safely is through the system they've already built. The labels, Betty realized. Exactly. They will try to signal each other. Danger. Abort. Meet. They will use the store. It's their safe zone. We need you to spot the signal. You know their language better than we do. You know the items. You know the shelf placement. Betty went back to work on Wednesday. The store felt different. The stock boy, Timmy, had been replaced by a man named Steve, who looked like he could bench press a Buick. The lady at the bakery counter was wearing an earpiece hidden under her hairnet. Betty stood at her register. She scanned milk. She scanned bread. She waited. She felt eyes on her constantly, not the FBI. Him. At 11 a.m., the student walked in. He didn't come to the line. He walked the perimeter of the store. He was checking for surveillance. He was good, but Steve, the stock boy, was better. Steve dropped a pallet of soda cans, creating a distraction. The student didn't flinch. The student walked to aisle 4, canned vegetables. He stood there for a long time. Then he left without buying anything. Betty signaled to Steve. Steve went to aisle 4. He came back to the front and shook his head slightly at Betty. Nothing. The day dragged on. The tension was excruciating. Every time the automatic doors opened, Betty flinched. Then, at 2 p.m., the architect arrived. He looked terrified. His skin was pale, clammy. He was wearing the raincoat, collar turned up. He didn't go to the aisles. He came straight to Betty's line. He didn't have any groceries. He stood in front of her. The store was quiet. He started, his voice cracking. I need a pack of cigarettes, Marlboro Reds. Betty reached for the rack behind her. Her hand hovered over the packs. Soft pack, he said. She grabbed the soft pack. She scanned it. Beep. 85 cents. He handed her a dollar bill. His hand was shaking so violently that he dropped the bill on the conveyor belt. As he reached to pick it up, he leaned in. Close. Tell him, he whispered, so low Betty almost missed it. Tell him I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Tell him Bluebird. He grabbed the cigarettes and ran out of the store. Betty stood frozen. Tell him? She looked at the dollar bill in her hand. It was a normal dollar bill. Bluebird. She pressed the pedal under her register, the silent alarm the FBI had installed. Steve was at her side in 2 seconds. What happened? He spoke to me. Betty gasped. The architect. He thinks I'm the contact. It dawned on her then. The mechanic had seen her take the can. He hadn't told the architect that the drop was compromised by a civilian. He must have told the architect that the pickup had been changed, that there was a new handler. Me. The mechanic had set her up. Or perhaps the mechanic didn't know who she was and assumed she was a new KGB asset sent to intervene. What did he say? Steve asked. He said, tell him I'm done. Tell him Bluebird. Steve touched his earpiece. Control, we have a verbal contact. Subject architect is attempting to defect or sever ties. Code word, Bluebird. Steve looked at Betty with a new respect. You just became the most important person in this operation, Betty. He trusts you, or he fears you. Either way, he's talking to you. What does Bluebird mean? It means, Agent Sterling's voice came through Steve's earpiece, audible only to him, that he is ready to come in, but he's terrified of the mechanic. He needs an extraction. And he wants me to pass the message to the mechanic, Betty realized. Yes, Steve said, and you're going to do it. The FBI plan shifted rapidly. Betty Miller, cashier, was now Betty Miller, active asset. We can't arrest the architect yet, Sterling told her in the back office, while the real manager cowered in the corner. If we grab him, the mechanic disappears. The mechanic is the big fish. He's the handler, the KGB link. We need to catch the mechanic accepting the info or making a move. So, what do I do? Betty asked. She was surprised by how steady her voice was. The mechanic will come in. He will expect a signal. The architect told you Bluebird. That's a distress code, but the mechanic doesn't know the architect told you. The mechanic is testing you. He wants to know if you are in the game. If I pass the message, I'm a spy. If you don't, he might kill you to tie up the loose end, Sterling said bluntly. We need you to pass the message, but we control how. Sterling pulled out a pricing gun, the old-fashioned kind with the sticky labels. You are going to mark a specific item. We believe their code for meeting emergency is a red sticker on a jar of Smucker's strawberry jam. Can you do that? I can do that, Betty said. When the mechanic comes to your line, he will buy that jar. If he buys it, it confirms he accepts the meeting. We will take him down at the meeting spot. Betty took the pricing gun. It felt heavy, weapon-like. She went back to the floor. She went to aisle 3. She found the Smuckers. She clicked the gun. Thwack. A red price tag. She placed it at the front. She returned to her register. At 4:45 p.m., the mechanic entered. He didn't look like a mechanic today. He was dressed in a suit, looking like a businessman. But Betty recognized the eyes. Cold, dead. He walked through the store. He checked the baby aisle. Nothing. He checked the salt. Nothing. He walked to the jams and jellies. Betty held her breath. Steve was pretending to mop near the dairy section, his hand on his weapon. The mechanic picked up the jar of strawberry jam. He looked at the red sticker. He turned the jar over in his hands. He smiled, a cruel, small smile. He walked to Betty's register. Hello, he said. His voice was smooth now, not rasping. Working hard? Always, Betty said. She scanned the jam. Beep. Anything else? No, he said. Just the sweets. He leaned in. Tell our friend. The bird flies at midnight. Pierce Park. He paid and left. Betty waited until the doors closed. Did you get that? She whispered to the air. We got it. Sterling's voice came from the ceiling speakers. Or maybe it was just in her head. Pierce Park, midnight. We're going to end this. But as Betty watched the man walk away, she noticed something he had left on the counter. A book of matches. She picked it up. Inside, scrawled in pencil, was a set of numbers. It wasn't a meeting time. It was a flight number. He's lying, Betty said aloud. He's not going to the park. He's leaving. She ran to the door. Steve, he's running.